there's coral, there's blood. Remember that, 621.
Often the pursuit of science is a noble one, but in the story of Armored Core, it is anything but the case of one character, Handler Walter. Walter is a casualty of the pursuit gone wrong and in the absence of ethical boundaries. He is a character wholly consumed and shaped by one defining event, the fires of Ibis. To understand Walter and his legions of hounds, we have to go back to where it all began, half a century ago. This is Walter's legacy.
Let's get to work.
It is never explicitly stated, but Walter's origins can be traced back to before the fires of Ibis. Descriptions of him are found in the logs of Professor Nagai, the Rubicon Research Institute director. One can infer that the logs are referring to him from the descriptions used. Walter also displays a wealth of knowledge about Institute City and the work done there throughout the campaign, raising suspicions about who he actually is.
The vascular plant. It's still here. The Ibis series. Still functional. Once the barrier's down, we'll step into the unknown, where the coral's waiting for us.
Walter, it's like he already knows where the coral convergence is. What makes him so confident?
As we dive into Walter's story, it will challenge our own morality and make us question it.
Once we've caught our breath, let's talk about Walter.
Walter was just a boy during the prime days of Institute City. He was the son of a prominent research assistant, dubbed Assistant Number 1. Not much is known about Walter at this time other than how he was perceived. Nagai describes him as a reticent one, tough too, beyond his years. The famed artist STK notes that he is sharper than he looks. I would like to assume that being the son of a research assistant, Walter spent many a days among academics in his youth. He was surrounded by those with ambition and those carrying out experiments in the name of bettering humanity, including his father. He was close to this team, family almost. And while not much is known about Walter at this time, what makes Walter important is what he experienced. His father tampered with coral's potential. He believed that it could be used to augment humans. Nagai views the logic in this experimentation, however, clearly expresses his disagreement with the work. That no ethical scholar would ever dare to cross the point of no return. That Assistant Number 1 had lost his mind. I would wager Nagai tried to talk his assistant out of this work, but was unable to, noticing how consumed he was by his research. Even if he prohibited his assistant to continue this line of work, I imagine that Assistant Number 1 was possessed by it. Perhaps it even spoke to him and compelled him to continue. Nagai describes the situation as none other than mankind is driven by possibilities. It is here we see that the pursuit of science is devoid of sensibility. It has simply gone too far. This is where the story takes a horrific turn. It is in another log we learn that Nagai decides to keep Walter at the lab, saying that their research robbed him of his mother and drove his father mad. He has every right to hate me, Nagai says. This line of text can have many meanings, but what I read between the lines here is this. Walter's father, Assistant Number 1, driven mad by the potential of coral, did the unspeakable. He attempted human augmentation on his wife. We already know from arena logs that earlier gen augmentations are flawed, Sula being the prime case of first-generation augmentation with a success rate of 10%. The augmentation that Assistant Number 1 conducted predates modern human augmentation. One can only imagine how horrifying the first attempt was. I can only speculate based on how Walter is described as a boy. He witnessed part, if not all, of this experimentation. He saw the madness of brilliance firsthand. Nagai assumes responsibility for him from this point forward, hoping that his second assistant will be able to help, that she will be able to give him something to smile about. And if you've played the game and paid close attention to character dialogues, this is none other than Carla.
Let me tell you my motto, tourist. Get your laughs while you can.
What happens to Walter and his father from this point onwards is unknown. While Nagai is seen to oppose human augmentation, he also tampered with the coral that inevitably caused a collapse that humanity had no hope of controlling. Nagai experimented with maximizing a growing coral by accumulating it in a high density. It is this high density of coral that they witness a resonance, a mutation, one that causes the fires of Ibis. Nagai knew how dangerous this was. It is for this reason the Ibis series was created, as a countermeasure to keep Rubicon safe.
The Ibis series are no ordinary weapons.
However, even the Ibis series was not enough. In light of the imminent destruction of Institute City and Rubicon, Nagai passes on their sins, their legacy, to Carla. In his final moments, Professor Nagai watches the fires of Ibis from a rooftop in Institute City, holding responsibility and burden of the sins of their experimentation. We can tell he still cares about Walter despite all that transpires, as his final act is to send Walter and Carla away to one of Jupiter's colonies, where friends will look after them. These are his final words. Whatever future awaits the boy, I hope he grows into a man strong enough to seize it. His final words are heartbreaking, as Walter's future is not his own, seized and possessed by a legacy.
621. I have to dispose of you. Corporations. Orders. No. My friend's mission.
The legacy of the scholars of Institute City was never directly passed on to Walter. However, he made it his own.
A friend of mine sent a request. Now, this one comes from me. You know what hidden dangers lurk within the coral. The fires of Ibis should have wiped the coral out, but it survived. Gathered. Eventually, it'll spill out from Rubicon and contaminate space itself. The coral must be burned. 621. This isn't an order. It's a legacy. My fallen friends entrusted this duty to me, and now it's my turn to hand it on.
Possessed by damage Coral caused upon him, those he cared about, and his home, it's not strange to see Walter take up this mantle. Whether it was revenge, fulfillment of a promise, or preventing Coral from destroying more lives, it is unknown. I like to think that Walter feels directly responsible, as it was his father that took the research too far, and he had to cleanse his father's mistakes.
Let me tell you a story before you go. There once was a scientist. He abandoned his family to delve into the secrets of coral. His work yielded a carnival of horrors, augmentation surgery included. But there was another scientist. He took his colleagues' sins upon himself and set it all ablaze. Died with no regrets.
He takes this legacy even more seriously than Carla, who cares more for him than the legacy itself.
How's it going, Walter?
621's still performing well, but I doubt the voices have gone away.
I was asking about you, Walter. But whatever. Bigger things. The coral. You'd better find it.
Walter's future is grim, but full of purpose, driven by a goal bigger than himself.
Raven, there's something you need to know. This isn't about just finding the coral, Raven. He's after something more, and he's using you to do it.
Sula describes him as incorrigible. He sees him as nothing other than a menace, willing to expend as many lives as it takes to get the deed done, to burn the last cinders. I don't see Walter in a similar light. Walter is a victim to a power beyond humanity. He saw Coral through the lens of suffering and destruction. It is only natural for him to feel so strongly against what has torn his life apart. His perspective is cemented as a young child. It becomes his entire personality.
When something's alive, it doesn't die easy. You have to burn every last cinder.
His language is so negatively charged about Coral,
Burn the coral.
because he simply never had a chance to see it otherwise. His fate was sealed by the fires of Ibis. It is only during the fight against 621, someone he arguably came to love as a son, does he understand that perhaps his ways are not the answer, that his legacy was alive, claiming human lives, and that he was perpetuating the hurt.
So what happened to 617 and the others? Fill me in, Admiral Walter.
I see you've got a new augmented human. What happened to 617 and the rest?
Their jobs. They did what it took to get us here.
In his final moments, Walter does not act on the legacy that consumed him. He tosses it aside and spares 621.
The mission. My friend's wishes. Look at you, 621. You found
It is at this moment that Walter, a victim to the atrocities of science, that he is free. I feel that this is the best ending for Walter, as it spares us conscience for carrying out a legacy this big. However, if 621 carries on Walter's torch and burns the last cinders, Walter expresses his gratitude and apologies, for he recognizes the pain of a burden of that scale, but feels at peace, knowing that Coral can never hurt anyone again.
Looks like you got the job done. You chose to carry our burden and right the wrongs of the past. I'm sorry. And I'm grateful.
But at what cost? How many had to die? Rubiconians, mercenaries, and Coral voices, to ensure that this power is never misused again. Let that sink in. Personally, I favor the Liberator of Rubicon ending, one where life prevails after the sin of those in their ivory tower, that humanity can learn from their mistakes and ensure that they are not repeated.
I know Walter feared a collapse. But I promise you, there's another way.
The Fires of Ibis is a definitive moment in history with that lesson. However, there was no catalyst of change in place to ensure those lessons were implemented. Knowledge of the events of the Fires of Ibis were partial at best. Only 621 had the power to piece it all together with the perspective of many. I hope that you will keep this in mind when examining the events that take place in modern day. Walter is a character that will divide players based on their own views of morality and ethical boundaries. Players will be split on which decision is the most politically correct, based on their own worldviews colored by their own experiences.
Yes. Kindling for the fire.
Humanity wants to burn it all. Everything on Rubicon. I won't let you. Your fire must die.
Whatever your morals are, I argue it'll be hard to contest this opinion. I believe Walter was helpless and a victim of circumstance, but his views about Coral are not absolute. What do you believe?